Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another set of exciting guests on this podcast. We have a couple of leaders with the Rank My Vote Florida. We're going to talk about ranked choice voting and some other stuff on our podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Rank My Vote Florida.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us, Andrew.
We're glad to have you. Audience, you can hear two voices, so would you please introduce yourselves to us? Give us a brief biographical sketch.
Daria, you lead.
Okay, so thank you, John. Thank you, Andrew. My name is Daria Laycock. I am the statewide organizer for Rank My Vote Florida. So primarily what I do for the organization is educate people about ranked choice voting and other electoral reforms like open primaries. That mainly happens through canvassing or through speaking events. And then I onboard people into our volunteer teams and mobilize them to help us move ranked choice voting in Florida.
And Andrew, my name is John Severini. I am the executive director and chair of Rank My Vote Florida. Been working on trying to bring ranked choice voting to elections in Florida for the last 6 years. My background is information technology. I ran a small information technology company for 30 years, retired, but really passionate about trying to change our political system because the two-party duopoly is just not working. And I think maybe a lot of your listeners agree with that. Most people don't know what ranked choice voting is. Once they understand it, overwhelmingly, and I'm going to say 85-90% of people say, yes, that makes sense. This is a no-brainer. And it's nonpartisan. And it's third party, organizations love it because it gives them a fairer chance. And we believe competition is a good thing. And right now our system isn't overly competitive. So that's that. And I thank you again. We're looking forward to answering your questions and educating your viewers.
Sure. So since you're the chair of the organization, kindly tell us some roles and responsibilities. Our audience members are movers and shakers that are involved in organizations, so they might want to be a chair someday. So kindly explain what the chair in your organization does.
I guess, direct all activities. Where right now our mission is to educate. We're not lobbying. We're not trying to pass legislation at the moment. We were doing that, and I'll talk about that later. But right now, it's mostly a ground or grassroots growing the organization, which brings in donors, which allows us to grow our structure, and then ultimately get in front of our legislators and hopefully, get them to agree. This is something that would benefit Florida. So as the chair of the organization, that's what I do.
Okay. Sounds good. So our audience, most of them have probably heard of ranked choice voting. Some of them may not. So kindly explain your definition of ranked choice voting.
Daria, that's you.
Yeah, so ranked choice voting is an upgrade to our current voting system. Traditionally, in an election, people are usually picking between two candidates, and every once in a while there'll be a third-party candidate, and you have the option to vote for them. With ranked choice voting, we can have any number of candidates on the ballot, and people will rank these candidates in order of their preference. So you'll give us your first, second, third, sometimes all the way up to your fifth choice and options. In a ranked choice voting election, no candidate wins without 50% of the vote. So if in the first round of voting, no candidate wins, the candidate with the least amount of votes is eliminating, and those votes are redistributed until we do have a candidate who has won 50% of the cast votes. And that just ensures that we have leaders who are more representative of the populace and that are more representative of the populace.
So, and let me jump in on that, Daria. And what that really does, Andrew, is I'll go back to the competition. It allows these third-party candidates to run without fear of being the spoiler. Today in our elections, third parties have such little chance of winning. So sometimes they enter and a Green Party candidate will probably siphon votes away from a Democrat, or a Libertarian candidate will siphon votes away from a Republican and possibly throw the election to the opposite side. Ranked choice allows you to vote for that Green Party or that Libertarian and then pick a second and a third choice. So it allows more third parties to enter and have a serious chance. That spoiler effect, and it also makes the candidates appeal beyond their base. Right now, our candidates just say, if I can win one more vote than my opponent, I'll be the winner. And they just focus on their base. And that creates all kinds of negative, ugly campaigns. In this election, you have to, if I'm running against Daria, I have to appeal to Daria's voters and say, you know what, I know you're going to vote for Daria, but consider me for your second choice because Daria and I agree on these things. And it truly does change the civility of elections. So those are some of the advantages of ranked choice.
Okay. Now, since your organization is based in Florida, kindly tell us of the situation in Florida. What's it like in general election, and also particularly in regard to ranked choice voting?
Okay, I'll start that. Go ahead, Daria.
I was going to say, John, you have the most unique perspective on this, but it might be helpful to talk a little bit about the history of ranked choice voting in Florida.
Sure. Yeah, and I will. So in Florida in particular, Andrew, ranked choice voting was never used in Florida. The city of Sarasota, which is where I live, approved it for our city elections, our municipal races, our mayor, and our city council. It was approved overwhelmingly, 78% support on the ballot, but was never implemented because we needed the state to certify it and approve the software to run a ranked choice election. And we petitioned the state for 5 years to allow Sarasota to run it. Now, these are for city elections. They're nonpartisan. If you run for mayor of Sarasota, you're not a Democrat, you're not a Republican. You are John Severini, and I want to be your mayor because. And many times we get 10 or 12 people running in these races for 1 or 2 city commissioner spots. So ranked choice was the right tool. Our citizens liked it. But the state was obstructing our ability to implement it. So we decided we'll see if other cities wanted to do it. And the city of Gainesville came out 100% unanimous. Their city council voted, yes, we'd like to use it for city elections in Gainesville. And the city of Clearwater did the same, both with the caveat that the state would allow these elections. So once we had 3 cities behind this, we brought it back to the state. And then they finally said, well, you're right, cities have the right to do this, but we don't like the idea of, they passed a law to ban it for all cities.
Oh, no. Yeah.
That happened in 2019. We have yet to get a real good explanation as to their rationale. So we don't know what they were thinking, but all I can tell you is it was never legal in Florida for general elections. So state and the federal elections, the plurality system would prevail. But our Constitution allowed for cities to do their own thing with elections. So, but now we can't. So it's banned, but that's all right. There's many other states where it's been banned, and they are slowly overturning it, and we hope to make Florida one of those.
Awesome. I like your optimism.
You have to be.
So you did mention that. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Daria, did I leave anything out of that?
I think you nailed it. We talked about SB 524. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's that SB 5? That's the law that banned it?
Well, that was actually the Senate bill. It was Senate Bill 524 that was proposed at. It did a lot of things. It was a big omnibus bill, and they just stuffed ranked choice voting in there in the last, in the 11th hour.
Okay.
It was called the Voter Integrity Act. It was Governor DeSantis' pet project.
Very ironically titled.
Yeah. So,
Sounds like it.
yeah, but it did pass along party lines as expected. So, your listeners might also be fans of open primaries.
Sure.
I don't know if you know much about open primaries. But
We haven't talked about them in detail. People have mentioned them here or there, so we'd love to hear more about it.
So again, Darry, if you don't mind, I'll start and then I'll let you jump in. So this is nationally it's catching on, and this is the way Alaska just approved ranked choice voting. It was a combination of open primaries and ranked choice voting.
Okay.
There are 6 other states that have similar bills in front of their legislature or will go to their voters for a ballot initiative to adopt ranked choice voting with open primaries. The way it works is everybody gets to vote in the primary, right? You don't have to be registered as any political party. And all candidates run. So you might have 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, a Green, a Libertarian, whatever. And you, as a voter, get to pick. You can say it. And you use ranked choice, and you decide, I like this candidate as my first choice, second, third, fourth. There's never an obligation to pick more than one. If you only like one, you get to pick that one.
All right.
There are multiple choices, and you're allowed to. And what happens is the top 5 go on to the general election. And then you'll use ranked choice voting again in the general. And there are different flavors of this, Andrew, so this isn't the only flavor. But using ranked choice voting again in the general, again, obviously in general elections, all voters vote, and you get to pick who you want. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. So what it does is it broadens the field, and it narrows the field to the top 5, and those top 5 enter the general. What's happening now is, and in Florida, it's a closed primary state, so only Republicans can vote in the Republican primary, and only Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary. And what happens is it skews both parties to the extreme, because primary voters are the more, hardcore voters that turn out. And then the people that go on to the general elections are more polarized. And then ultimately that's who gets into our government. So open primaries and ranked choice voting, the organization, and I'll do a shout out to, it's called the Institute for Political Innovation. Okay. The woman that chairs that is Catherine Gehl, Gehl, and they have great information about the benefits of this approach. So we're hoping to adopt some form of that in Florida.
Okay. So you see open primaries going hand in hand with ranked choice voting?
100%.
Sounds good.
They don't have to. Go ahead, Gary. I'm going to let you talk there.
To add to what John is saying, we are, like you mentioned, a closed primary state. And so not only does that make people of the 2 major parties cast their ballot for more extreme candidates, but it also leaves a large portion of our population disenfranchised and unable to participate in the primary. So I think right now, Florida is 51% Republican and 47% Democrat, which means that there's 2 or 3% of Floridians who can't participate in the primary. And those are the people that we want to hone in on and have join our movement and give power back to.
Sure.
Hey, Daria, I'm sorry. Those numbers are, right now we have almost 30% of Floridians are identified as no party affiliation or MPA. So 30% of Florida voters don't participate in primaries.
Wow, that's a lot.
30%, yep. And, and so that 30%, which I'm one of, we just have to wait and see who the 2 major parties pick, or all parties pick, quite honestly, and then we get to choose from that. Now their argument is, and in fairness, they'll say, well, I'm sorry, this is a closed party and you have to be a member of our party to have a say in that. Well, okay, I understand where they're coming from, but these are the candidates that are going to run our country, and we're all Americans. I'd like all Americans to have a say in who gets to those final 5 on the ballot. And then all Americans can decide who the number one winner is. And that's a more equitable system. And
Okay.
Institute for Political Innovation does a wonderful job of explaining the benefits of that.
Okay. So if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can research the Institute for Political Innovation is their name, right?
Right.
Okay. So you mentioned an argument that people give against open primaries. What is an argument or arguments people give against ranked choice voting, and how would you counter them?
Go ahead, Daria.
So moreover, we hear that it is confusing. When I'm out at canvases and I'm meeting people where they're at and trying to educate them about ranked choice voting, once I get to, everyone's okay with ranking candidates in order. It's the vote redistribution that really gets people. So it's just a matter of explaining to them that this is a system that's commonly used around the world, and it has been proven to give us more fair, equitable, and civil candidates.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that. As far as it's confusing. The first time you do anything, there's a learning curve. And people are resistant to change. Right? They've never done it before, so you explain it to them. But if you show them a ballot, and it's so simple, it's like any exam you ever took with multiple choice questions, A, B, C, or D. You just fill in the bubbles, and you fill in first choice, second choice, third choice. In the 62 cities that are using ranked choice voting in America, all of the exit polls show the voters get it after they've used it, they like it, they want to use it again, and errors on ballots, or what in the election business called spoiled ballots. If you make an error, you rank 2 as your first choice, let's say, for example, that would be an error, and the system can't figure out who you really wanted. So the errors on ballots is the exact same percentage as a standard ballot. There is no increase in voter confusion. So, yeah, people will say it's confusing. Not true. And once they use it once, they get it and they say, oh, that was pretty simple. So.
Okay. So you mentioned that it's done around the world. Can you briefly describe some ways it's been used in other nations?
Well,
so I want to say India uses it to elect their prime minister, and then Canada uses it to, I might have to double check myself on this, but I think they use it for representatives.
Oh.
They use it in most of their major party primaries, their internal primaries, to decide who gets on that general election ballot, which is also a great application for it. I want to say New Zealand has been using it, and Australia has been using it for almost 100 years.
Wow.
And each of these countries use it for different, not all use it to elect their prime ministers or their presidents. But, there's a long history of it.
Okay, so there's good evidence that it works in those other places.
100%.
There's also a proven track record of ranked choice voting working in America. I know New York has it currently, and they have the most diverse city council of any other place in the States. So yeah, in places where RCV is working, more women and people of color are running and being elected.
Yeah, Andrew, and I'll speak to that. 6 years ago when I got involved with this, only 12 cities in America were using it, and no states had adopted it. In those 6 years, a relatively very short time frame, it's gone from 12 to 62 cities using it around the country, and from no states to 2 states. And I believe next year, Nevada will vote on it for a second time. If it passed the first time, if it passes the second time, Nevada will be the 3rd state to use it, and that's for all elections, federal, state, and local.
Okay.
And there are probably 4 or 5 more states. So it is the fastest growing nonpartisan electoral reform in the nation. Actually, it's fortuitous. This is the day after Election Day. Yesterday it was on the ballot in 5 cities around the nation, and all 5 approved it.
Wow.
5 to 5. 2 cities that had been using ranked choice voting There were groups in opposition to it, and they were trying to undo it, and both of those failed. So ranked choice voting remained, and again, overwhelmingly supported. And yesterday, for the first time, the city of Boulder, Colorado used ranked choice. It had already been passed. Yesterday was the first time that they used it. So ranked choice voting is in the last 27 ballot measures to support ranked choice voting. It went 27 for 27. It was approved in every one of these. Yep.
Interesting.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you attribute to that? Is it things that the ranked choice voting movement is doing? Is it factors in our electoral system? What do you attribute to that?
So I think voters are tired with the two choices that we continue to get. They're tired of all of the negative campaigns, and you know, that's how people win these days, is trash your opponent. I don't think that's resonating with voters anymore. And ranked choice brings civility. It makes you reach across the aisle, not just pandering to your base. You know, look, the truth is the technology is also now here to enable this and make this. Look, one of the other, I'll say, criticisms of ranked choice is you have to wait a long time to find out who won. Totally not true. Some cities and states have certain laws on their books that require X amount of time to count mail-in ballots and other things, so they can't officially declare winners. But because of technology today, we know on an election night, in a ranked choice election, same way you know in a plurality election. It does it instantaneously. But so I'll go back to voters are tired with the current system. This is clearly a fairer way to elect. It brings more people into the equation that could actually have a chance and not be the spoiler. And so I think Americans are just like, yeah, let's try it, because the current system isn't working.
Sounds good. So your organization, you mentioned you're focusing on educational efforts these days. How specifically are you doing that? Are you doing that through social media, through your website, or are you doing things in person? How are you promoting the educational objectives you have?
So I think it's all of those things you mentioned. It's social media. We have a social media team that posts things regularly. It's things through our website. So whenever we post or we get a letter to the editor in a newspaper, we're making sure that we're posting that on social media and on our website. I think two of the biggest components of our education campaign are canvassing. So we will have a chapter group go out to like a farmer's market or an event. Recently we were at the Florida Democratic Convention, and then we're regularly at farmers markets around the state. But we educate people in person and encourage them to sign up to be a volunteer, to be a donor, just to receive more education about ranked choice voting. Additionally, we do speaking presentations. So if anyone listening wants us to speak to their group, just give us a call. We're open and willing. But we go meet people where they're at. So this is League of Women Voter Groups. This is third parties. And we just inform them about ranked choice voting in depth, give a long form speech, and encourage those people to also become supporters of ranked choice voting.
Good. Sounds good.
And Gary, would you mind if we put it, how do they find us on social media?
That'd be a great question.
On X, Instagram, and Facebook, we are Rank My Vote Florida, so at Rank My Vote Florida. And then you can find us on our website at rankmyvoteflorida.org.
Okay, great.
And spell out every word in that, Andrew. I'm sorry. It's Rank My Vote Florida. You spell out every word. Yeah. .org.
Okay. I can plan to include those in the show notes for the episode.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
So I'll obviously, Andrew, we're focused on Florida, but you know, we work together with all of our partners around the state, around the country. You know, there are upwards of 25 active campaigns in 25 states in America. There are a couple of national organizations that mentor us, and I'll tell your listeners, rankthevote.us is one of our national partners.
Oh.
The organization that's been leading the charge on this for more than 30 years is Fair Vote, and that's fairvote.org. And then Unite America, lots of organizations getting behind this now.
Good. All right. So we got the information. Our audience can go there to support you. So we thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking about the exciting things you're doing and the progress you've been making in this important reform.
Well, we appreciate your, willingness to help us spread the word here. And I hope your listeners will check it out and help us advance this.
All right.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you for having us, Andrew.
My pleasure. We wish you all the best in your organization and also in your personal and professional lives, everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.